Welcome back to another episode of Student of the Game. I'm with my buddy, James O'Connor. James, how you doing today?
Good, Brad. How are you?
Good. We're going to talk all things branding, personal branding, as it relates to NIL, name, image, and likeness. I got a little bio on James here for a second. People need to know who James O'Connor is. So James is an employment law practice. It involves consulting with clients on compliance matters and advocating on behalf of clients in litigation. I spent a lot of time doing litigation, defending insurance-related claims, coach corporate clients through cybersecurity, data breaches, et cetera, et cetera. And then recently, in the space of name, image, and likeness, has drafted NIL policies for universities and marketing agreements for both interested commercial vendors and student athletes. This is the interesting part. He's also been registered civil mediator for more than 13 years and has significant experience with negotiations of all kinds. My guess is because you have 3 daughters, right?
Yeah, negotiation can mean a lot of different things depending on the context. So, yeah, intra-family negotiations, um, you know, litigation dispute negotiations. Yeah,
Well, that's awesome. Well, James and I got connected. I don't know the year, maybe '07 or 6 or something like that. Leadership Fort Wayne, maybe?
I'm going to take it all the way back to 2004.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's been a while.
You
Um,
still have dark hair.
yeah.
I don't.
That's fantastic. So, a little known, a fun fact about James and his wife, Kim. They actually named my middle daughter. This is kind of weird. It's kind of weird to bring up on the podcast, but so we had one, and when you're young and you're starting off and you have a kid, you kind of have some people have like the name, like, okay, this is gonna be. Well, when you get to 2, it's like, oh man, we got to find something else. So we actually did the baby name game where we sent out to probably 200 clients. Hey, send us some names, and whichever one we pick, we're gonna support and give a prize to. So you and your wife came up with Delaney, and we chose it, and so now I kind of feel like that makes this family almost.
Uh, so because of the relationship, and I knew and immediately respected your hustle game when you were throwing out a baby naming competition as a part of personal branding. I was like, oh, we got to watch this guy. But because we had developed a relationship with you and Lindsay, Kim was really dialed in. She really felt like she had the in, and she called the shot. She didn't tell me what it was until she submitted it. Before y'all announced the winner, she told me what it was, and I'll be darned. I still remember the prize was a 150 gift card to Williams Sonoma, which existed at Jefferson Point at the time, and we invested it with a steamer double broiler that we still use to this day.
That's fantastic. I love it. I love it. So, what better story that we get into name, image, and likeness when James and Kim named our daughter? So, name, image, and likeness. This is something for those that don't know what name, image, and likeness is. We're actually going to bring this to small business. How can your small business benefit from name, image, and likeness? If you think about doing business with people, whether it's your attorney or your accountant or your landscaper, or if you're buying some merch, there is something to be said about having a good name. I mean, it's one of the only things that we have for eternity is a good name. It's good reputation. The image, what image do we want to brand ourselves with? Your image is kind of the habits and your character, who you are every single day. And then likeness. I'm not gonna lie, when I hire people, maybe other than like a brain surgeon or a heart surgeon, like the likability factor needs to be pretty high. If we're going to do business together, there needs to be some likability. And I played college basketball a long time ago. And I remember, and James, you could probably speak to this. I remember the O'Bannon brothers that played for UCLA that kind of, I think, instigated or started this. And let's talk about that a little bit. Where did NIL start from?
Well, so historically, NIL is a derivative of the right of publicity. And across these 50 states, not every state recognizes a right of publicity. So it really hasn't been since the NCAA had to modify their rules to permit NIL compensation that it was really even an issue. Because before then, the rationale, flawed as it may be, was allowing student athletes to be compensated for the use of their name, image, or likeness would be on par with illegal recruiting. It would be pay for play, pay to play. It would be just another example of illegal recruiting. Well, with the advent of technology and different platforms where young people can leverage technology to become brand ambassadors, the NCAA found itself in a position where they were restricting, making it more difficult for student athletes to use legitimate means to monetize their own name, image, and likeness, which is a, a an impairment, a breach, a restriction on rights that non-student athletes were able to have. You could have a YouTube influencer as a dorm hallmate next door making money online, but the rules that the NCAA were limiting student athletes for would restrict it, and that's inherently anti-competitive. The NCAA was in charge of those rules, and so um, various student athletes over the last 15 years, taking it all the way back to O'Bannon, have filed lawsuits against the NCAA saying, "Hey, your rules are too restrictive. They create an anti-competitive environment, which in the United States we don't like." Um, and so when the NCAA gets sued on an antitrust basis, they lose 100% of the time.
So, okay, you said something that I didn't even think about. So let's get to the fundamentals here because we're going to master these fundamentals of NIL, name, image, and likeness. So something you said was fundamental is it there was a direct competitive advantage that athletes did not have. You just said if a YouTuber, if an influencer was making $1 million a year and lived across the hall from you in your dorm, and you were helping the university make $50 million, I couldn't participate in that.
That's
So
right.
there's some. So I'm here's what I hear. So NIL is neutral. I've heard you say this on the podcast before.
Mhm.
Money is neutral. You can do good
Mhm.
with money. You can do bad with money, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
many things in life are neutral. NIL is neutral, and I think a lot of times people think of pay for play like we're paying these athletes. Um, you came up with something called the ABCs of NIL. Why don't you dig into that? Because fundamentally, I think that's where there we can start the conversation of name, image, and
Yeah,
likeness.
so the I came up with the moniker ABCs as a mnemonic device. I was actually helping a mutual friend of ours figure out how this new change, and when we say new, the uh, the lifted prohibition, the rules of the game changed officially June 30 of 2021. I'd been watching it come along and understood based on my employment law background and some of my legal litigation practice that articulating what rights of publicity, name, image, and likeness applied in a sports context was going to be it's new territory. It's not that it's fundamentally difficult to understand. It's just that it's new, and so it just needed to be applied and broken down. So the mnemonic is ABCs. What does that mean? Student athletes are allowed to have agents or attorneys represent their interests in either negotiating or reviewing or papering the contracts that exist between the athlete and an NIL vendor partner. B is banned industries. Just because the student athletes can participate in commercial activity does not mean they can rep every industry. Banned industries are still restricted. What are banned industries? Typically anything with vice, alcohol, drugs, nicotine, gambling. Um, there's a handful of other ones, but where the university or the NCAA wants to maintain an upstanding image
Hmm.
uh, for society, it wants to make sure that their student athletes aren't promoting vice, which makes some sense if the target audience is young people who can't participate in that commercial activity.
Hmm.
C and D is C is conflicts, D is disclosures, which actually is a paradigm where, in order to avoid um, a limitation on a student athlete being able to rep a particular brand, they need to disclose to the university any potential conflicts. Well, what does that mean? Um, our oldest daughter is at Purdue University. Purdue is a Nike school. If she's not a student athlete, if she was a student athlete, though, and Under Armour came to her and said, "Caroline, we'd like you to rep our brand," she'd be in a position to say, "Well, okay, I've got this commercial opportunity, but Purdue is a Nike school, UA is a direct competitor. How do I handle that?" She would have to disclose to the coordinator, the athletics director, whoever the representative is for the school, "Hey, look, we're a Nike school. I've got a competitor who wants to work with me personally. How do we navigate that?" So we disclose the potential conflict, and then there's a paradigm where um, official team activities are for the school's brand, Nike in case of Purdue. Um, Off official, if you're not at the practice field, if you're not in a game, if you're not traveling for a game, you're doing something unofficial, you're going to class, you're hanging out in the room, you can rep UA all you want.
If I'm a
So it's
basketball
able,
player and I want to go to the football game, I can do that because I'm not.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
So on your personal time, when you're doing something not affiliated with your team, you can have your commercial vendor partner. Um, ABCDE is for employment and what the status of employment means. I is for international and the impact that NIL has on international student athletes and what that looks like. Um, you know, S&T or scholarships and taxes. What is the role of a scholarship play vis-a-vis NIL dollars? Um, Taxes. Young people. Heck, there are adults who don't understand taxes. And now you're inviting student athletes who are still learning, still finding a voice, figuring out what the laws of compliance look like. Taxes is a big one when it comes to compliance. If you're making money more than $600 a year, the IRS expects you're going to report it. So, what does this mean? And so, ABCs of NIL is an educational tool designed to educate everybody in the value chain of stakeholders, from the student athlete to the coaches to the administrators to the marketing partners. How do you have a compliant program?
Wow. So in real estate, we have RESPA, Real Estate Settlement and Procedures Act, where we have to follow. There's a lot of rules and good faith that we abide by. But aside from that, um, talk to the small business owners that enjoy watching sports, enjoy watching the Colorado Buffaloes because they're entertaining,
Mm-hmm.
and talk to the landscaper. I mean, how would a landscaper, or how would somebody who prints merch, or how would a financial advisor or a real estate company handle NIL for themselves? I mean, I know how we do it, right? So there's some vendor partners that we have that absolutely benefit from being attached to our brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if I'm a landscaper, is I'm making this up, is Valvoline going to sponsor a landscaper that's got a huge business? Um,
So it really depends
how
on
does it
what
translate?
marketing looks like for the business,
Yeah.
right? As a small business, we know marketing is a part of making your brand aware. NIL allows a marketing partner to work with a student athlete at either the NCAA Division One all the way down to NAIA level, to leverage the student athlete's platform, their notoriety, to make the business brand aware. It's marketing, right? The value of that can be dependent on, well, what does the budget for a marketing look like, and what is the athlete willing to accept in exchange for raising the platform level of the NIL partner.
Or said
Um,
small
so
business owner.
so small, yeah,
Yeah.
for the small business. How are you going to market your business through? Now, that's the most transactional value associated with the deal, an NIL deal. Student athletes, though, have a shelf life. They're not going to play forever. Most of them will not become professionals in their chosen sport. I have argued that one unintended benefit to an NIL relationship is it introduces the business to the student athlete at a very early stage. Every business, whatever the industry, is recruiting talent. They need good people. Well, if you as a small business owner have identified a student athlete who represents your values well and has been brought up in a program that has been teaching values and fundamentals and leadership, and you have a successful commercial transaction while they're playing, when that student athlete is no longer playing and doesn't have the opportunity to play professionally, might there be an opportunity to bring that person into your organization in some capacity?
I,
That's
I absolutely
You're
agree.
starting a relationship early.
This whole podcast was built on the idea that relationships win. And that's exactly what you're talking about. Before we go into falling in love with practice and more of the behind the scenes on NIL and how small businesses can think about this as it relates to themselves, you said a couple people who qualify for NIL. So speak specifically to who qualifies for NIL. So the IHSAA, the Indiana High School Association, they are disqualified from NIL, correct?
Correct. And that's by statute is too strong a word, because IHSAA regulations are that they're regulations that are just monitored by a state agency. So it doesn't quite have the force of law, but they're in charge of deeming athletes eligible to participate. And this is where you get into how strongly does a specific state regulate student athletes, high school student athletes. So you can have a law, and many states have a law that I think it's 38 states now have a law that permits college student athletes to engage in NIL activity. 12 have it either under consideration or haven't even discussed it. Of the 50 states, and 51 if you include Washington, D.C., less than half, I think, it might be less than two-thirds, right now re- regulate or permit high school student athletes to participate. In other words, the state statutes had to pass a law specifically permitting high school athletes to participate, right? Indiana has no NIL law regulating either college athletes or high school athletes. And you could discuss why that might be the case. But in the absence of a state law expressly permitting it, it defaults to what is the agency, IHSAA in Indiana, say is okay. And the way they define amateurism is pretty vague. And it's basically a one liner that says any attempt to commercialize or make money off of participation in athletics deems the athlete ineligible. I don't know for how long that'll be the case, but that's where we are today.
Okay. Um, so Division One, two, three, NCAA, NAIA. You did mention NAIA,
Right.
but at the end of the
And
day, fundamentals are about eyeballs, right? It's about logically speaking, Division One athletes probably have more eyeballs than NAIA. But NAIA, I mean, you think about the communities that they're a part of. It's a focused, targeted area where there could be some huge opportunity for some stellar NAIA athletes that have a
based on the
following.
sport, based on the so if let's take Indiana Wesleyan University for example,
Mhm.
Marion, Indiana. Otherwise, in today's world, 2024, not a hub for commercial success. In the heyday, yes, but in today's world, a little different. But if there's a local pizzeria that knows that the star basketball player has a huge following, and if that student athlete were to show up post game to have a celebration at their pizzeria, that they would do box office business, right? They should be allowed to reach out to that marketing partner, that player, and say, "Hey, if you bring people with you post celebration, or they're part of your group, or we see a bump because in sales because you show up, hey, we think that's worth 5% of the gross receipts for the night." That is a totally legitimate NIL transaction.
I think
So
I think one of the
depends on
things, yeah, not to interrupt, but I think one of the things that people fail to understand is like there's such creativity in some of these NIL deals that are being done right now. I take what we do every single day, and like I told you, there's vendors that win because they're attached to our brand. Therefore, we can do more things to benefit more people. Like it's a cycle, right? And so what you're saying is this NAI athlete may not get $25,000, but may have an opportunity to get free pizza for the year.
that's
And,
right.
and more importantly, maybe he gets a percent of the sales for those nights. You're right. I mean, everything, right? So if let's just pause for a second, I'm gonna take this and make a shameless plug. So we're in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Purdue, Fort Wayne. We have sat on many meetings and boards with the collective here for the men's basketball program, and they're doing some great things.
Mhm.
Um, I think one of the best things is being able to take these guys out to lunch and mentor them. You talked about building relationships. There's been guys that have gone on fishing trips. There's been guys that, we've helped with housing. And so I think the reality is there's opportunity here. Speak about some of the opportunities through NIL that aren't just financial, that aren't just, pay for play performance.
Well, it speaks to what, when you're developing a relationship, what are the goals for the relationship? And in the Dons for Fort Wayne, one of the things I enjoy about participating with that group is the community mentorship, the opportunity to let student athletes who may not have had exposure to a lawyer or a business person, somebody who can broaden their horizon on how achievable an American dream can be. All they need, though, is the introduction, the ability to network, right? Um, the collective specifically is one way that can happen. So being able to just sit down for a meal and allow that interface to occur, allow that networking, allow that relationship to develop. even if the student athlete doesn't have an interest in law, but does have an interest in real estate, then I know a guy who I can connect him with, right? And so, being able to navigate the regulations that the NCAA has in place that will permit that professional networking to take place, and it's not associated with recruiting. It might be associated with building a culture. Hey, guess what? That speaks to every small business organization and how you're developing culture. So, it's fun to see Fort Wayne specifically embrace a collective that permits it.
Well, and I think, there's ripple effects to it, right? You talk about relationships, and this is public information, but Chuck Surak, a huge philanthropist here, has made a sizable donation to Dons for Fort Wayne, and it's because he sees what Coach Kaufman is doing in our community with community service, and there's a matching gift that he's been so generous with, and so I talked to Coach this morning, over 300 community service hours this summer.
That's
uh,
huge.
Donating their time 3 days a week to uh, the Jackson R. Lehman YMCA downtown,
Hmm.
the Boys and Girls Club, doing clinics and camps for people in the area. There's true benefit. This is one of our core values in our business is win together, and it's unique because in real estate, it's kind of the solopreneur, eat what you kill. And we've built a culture of winning together, meaning everybody on the team, when they win, we all win. And that's honestly what this is doing. Dons for Fort Wayne is creating a culture that we're winning together. One of the things that we do in our business is we give community tours. There's businesses out there. And if you're a business out there and you're hiring and you're bringing people in from out of town, we'd love to talk to you. But, for some of the hospitals, they bring somebody in, we give a tour of Fort Wayne. Well, Fort Wayne at this point is taking part in name, image, and likeness. We are trying to help advance the brand of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and
Yep.
and it's through a tour and selling the benefits of why somebody should live here, why somebody should move here, why somebody should engage in employment. And
So
it's
then
no different when you're recruiting.
embracing the student athletes platform where that player is uniquely positioned to reach a demographic that might not be reachable to me or to you otherwise is the perfect use of name, image, and likeness. And so why not allow these student athletes to be brand ambassadors for the city, for the collective, for the university, or a small business?
Well, I mean, we do a lot of client events, and we're actually discussing right now with Coach our next client event, having some guys out there signing autographs, having their schedule, put out there. There's going to be a bunch of kids. I mean, who doesn't want to meet somebody who's 6'10", right? Some big giant of a man, and really start to build relationships with this team. Come to the games and then follow them, see what they do. I mean, these are leaders in our community. These are future leaders in our community, and you hit the nail on the head. If you're a business out there listening, and you have an opportunity, you don't yes, would a donation to the collective be great? Absolutely. There's things we can do to really help advance our program. But if you're a business and there's some community service you'd like done, or maybe even job shadow or internships, I've heard of some successful internships that some local banks have done. A guy studies finance and wants to do an internship at a bank. There's tons of opportunities. You've talked a lot about kind of how NIL works, obviously the ABCs of it, but there's parents that listen to this. Let's coach some parents up a little bit. Let's say, I'll give you a hypothetical scenario. Let's say I have a daughter who's a senior going to college next year, and let's say I have another freshman daughter. This is not hypothetical, by the way.
I was going
But
to say
anyway,
completely random fact pattern.
but let's say that there's somebody that has kids out there that likes sports. Maybe they're good, maybe they're not. Maybe it's irrelevant. I've seen some big NIL deals where you have the guy at the end of the bench has never played, has a huge social media following. So this isn't just for the star athletes.
Mhm.
Talk to the parents. How can we advise our kids that NIL is not going away? We need to understand the rules of engagement. What advice
Yeah.
would you have for the parents out there that have kids in sports?
So I've had the benefit of developing relationships with athletes who are professional basketball players. I have papered deals for Division 1 um, Power Four athletes, and spoken with high schoolers who have a lot of upside potential, who know that NIL is going to be a part of their decision making process. Those are really fun conversations for me, in part because it's like coaching up a small business, And so one of the analogies I use is, and is, it's almost asset driven. thinking of the player as the business. If you've got that level of talent, let's just hypothetically keep it at that level where there's a chance the player is going to be making good money based on athletic performance. That player is the business. Most businesses are run by a board of directors. Now, mom and dad might be on the board of directors, but if mom and dad don't have the background in education, in finance, in compliance, marketing, business development strategies, how are mom and dad going to position their child or their ward, if they're guardians, um, to be able to leverage those opportunities? If they themselves don't have the experience, who are they going to partner with to be able to get the education, the experience necessary to protect the best interests of the athlete? And that can be a challenge because that's an inherent exercise in trust and and being able to ask the question, hey, we've got somebody who needs the help. We know we don't know. Can you help? Right? And figuring out who those people are, and are they do they have the spirit of a teacher to be able to walk along and guide and provide the guidance and advice like a
Mm.
board of directors would for a business, right? Um, so that's the approach I take. If I'm consulting with a family who needs to know, we're going to have Teams meetings. We're going to have email exchanges. I have been asked on other occasions to, hey, we've narrowed a top four. They're in XYZQ states. We need to know what the statutory framework for NIL looks like in those states based on school location so that we can evaluate opportunities. That's the kind of due diligence that is a part of recruiting. You're right. You may not make your ultimate decision on who's paying the most or who has the most lucrative NIL deals. There might be other very good reasons to take less money at a better culture in a different state. But those are the discussions you get to have to be able to figure out how are we protecting the interests of our child, ward, athlete.
Well, you're echoing the sentiments of this podcast, and its relationships win. And I think the short answer to the question that I asked would be: get people around you and your child that you trust, that you have a relationship with, that know how to guide, you know, said student athlete through this process.
That's it.
Um, I got an example here. College teammate was in town recently. Shout out to Pastor Keon for giving some advice to my kids. We were sitting at lunch, and I just asked them the question in front of the kids, and I said, "Hey, why don't you answer this? Talk to my kids about how they can use social media for good." Because at the end of the day, we talk about, people ask me all the time, like, "Hey, how'd you do it? How'd you build the business? How?" And I think how is usually the first question that people ask. And I came up with the acronym how. How do you be successful? How do you win? You help others win. You
Nice.
help
That's
others win.
great.
And so the framework that I try to teach my kids through with social media is it's all about helping other people win. If social media is about, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me, you don't get very far. That's transactional, like you talked about. When it comes to building a brand, and this is for you small business owners, this is for the kids, this is for the parents. If you're looking at how do you create influence, helping others win. And maybe winning is just your entertainment value. Maybe
Right.
winning is giving them advice or tips or tricks. If I'm a baker and I'm an influencer, I'm going to teach people how I make my muffins or my rolls, right? And so I'm going to build this big following. And so when Keon was in town, he was talking to my girls, and I said, "Hey, tell them about social media. They're kind of nervous to post something. They don't want it to be all about them. How do we help other people win?" And he just said something that was fascinating. He says, best known usually beats best. The best known usually beats best. And so he gave my kids the example. He goes, have you guys had a burger at a fast food restaurant before? I'm not going to name any chains.
Right.
And they're
A
like,
couple
yeah,
times.
right. And he said, what do you guys think of them? And they're like, yeah, they're all right. A burger at a fast food joint's pretty good. Did your dad make burger? Yeah.
Sure.
Are they good? Yeah, they're real good.
Yeah.
I'm not touting my own cheeseburgers
Yeah.
here, but
Grill master is okay.
but the reality is he made the point. Well, why does said food chain sell more burgers that are inferior to your dad's? Why do they
Right.
sell more? And it's because they're best known.
Hmm.
So So his comment to the kids were, if you don't create your brand for yourself, someone else will.
Yeah.
If you don't create the narrative for who you are, or who you want to be as a person, somebody else will. And at the end of the day, when it comes to name, image, and likeness, best known beats best. Here's a perfect example of that. The number one, and I didn't fact check this, but the number one NIL college athlete, I'm assuming, is not the best player
And,
in
and depending
in
on
many
the sport and
instances.
how far you're going, I mean, Olivia Dunn is the first name that pops to my mind because she is, by all accounts, crushing the social media game.
Mm-hmm.
She's a gymnast at LSU. In what other reality does anyone care about gymnastics at all, let alone at an SEC school, and we're in Big Ten country?
Sure. And you name some of the big ones. There's two in Colorado, right? You got Travis and Shadur. Are they the best? I don't know. Dion says that they are, right? You
Proud
know,
Papa, sure. Uh-huh.
Bronny James, another one. Great
Yep.
athlete. I'm pro Bronny James. I'm more pro Bronny James than most people. But I think the reality is he's best known. Well, why
Yep.
is he best known? Well, because his family's best known. So there's some collateral that he gets to use with that. So
Well, and I think
talk a little bit about how you can build that and may not be the best.
so it's the application of social media in today's world, and what are you using it for? And I think kudos to you and Lindsay for getting educated on what social media means to young people, teenagers specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, because we grew up in an era, right? We're at that age where there was no social media, and our girls get tired of hearing what life was like before iPhone. We the rule in our house has always been no social media until you are over 18 or 18 and going to school, because for us it was a protectionist thing. It was this is it's a new technology and not everybody's using it for good. And as a young person figuring out who you are, we don't want you to be influenced by the thoughts of others. And if we can't get into your computer, in other words, if we're not constantly on you to make sure you're using the tool in the right way, better for us to just say, from a safety standpoint, from an influences standpoint, no, don't do it. Now, I know they go on YouTube and see the fun reels, so they have some element of access to it, but there's at least a safety component that there's no direct messaging. And by and large, that has worked. So in my house, we don't have D1 athletes, we don't have NAIA athletes, but they know what the rule is. But if you guys are already using social media as an educational tool to say, this is a resource, how will it be used? And if you're focusing outward, not inward, then you're already showing the young person the paradigm shift of what this tool looks like, right? And when a technology is a resource, money is a resource, how are we using it for the benefit of whatever it is we're looking for? How are we taking lemons and making lemonade?
That is such a good point. I mean, at the end of the day, a tool looks different in one person's hand than another. If I give you a hammer, James, you'll probably build something. If you give me a hammer, I'll mess it up and have to call a contractor. So the reality is, how are we using these tools? And I think, go back to that comment, best known usually beats best. And we're talking about social media here. And even for small business, I think so many people are afraid to get in front of the camera. I think so many people are afraid of, like, well, I don't like how I sound. Well, guess what? You look how you look and you sound how you sound. So, like, let's get used to that. And I've been encouraging my team, like, get out there and share stories, get out on social media and share the successes that our clients have had, that, that position yourself as more of a guide. I don't do this from the standpoint of being the hero. This podcast isn't so that I can listen to myself while I'm walking the dog. This podcast is, I know some really cool people that I have relationships with, and I want the world to hear your expertise so that it blesses someone else. And I think if the kids can start to understand, I can use social media as that tool, they can create this environment that if they're in the opportunity, or if they have the opportunity years to come, they've set themselves up.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit more about social media real quick, because I'm thinking to myself, like, let's take landscaping for example. There's
Mm-hmm.
probably a great landscaper who is not on social media, doesn't have the following. They do a good job. They're relational, 3 generations deep, and they just go and put their head down and go to work. And then there's maybe the new guy who pops up that's amazing, that shows you how to have green grass. It shows you how to edge properly. That shows you what you need to do for fall maintenance, and their business explodes. They may not be the best yet, but their business explodes. Give some small business owners maybe some tips on social media. I know this isn't a social media podcast, but
Yeah.
NIL is directly correlated to how you can brand yourself.
It's the right of publicity. And so, how are we using those tools? Um, One of the reasons, and I'm going to tie it into student athletes, one of the benefits to utilizing student athletes in the NIL space is most of them don't have support personnel creating the digital content. So if you've got a student athlete entrepreneur, somebody who understands the hustle game and is willing to do digital content creation, that's skills they needed to learn to be able to produce their own brand, whether they're still playing, whether they're not playing, whether that's part of the marketing deal for the student athlete to create the digital content to promote your brand. NIL teaches or encourages skills development outside of the chosen sport, right? So that's how there's your tie-in. If you have put your fundamentals into being able to grow the best grass, then you probably haven't had the time to create the best digital content. But partnering with a person who has the platform and the skills to do the content so that your end user can readily consume it, that's a win-win.
I mean, what I heard from what you're saying is I'm just going to teach my girls how to do personal branding and marketing, because at the end of the day, uh, it's an interview to see which one can step into our business and take those same fundamentals.
Yeah. And what do the inherent natural talents of each person speak to? If you have somebody who is naturally on-air talent, great. If it's somebody who naturally does accounting a little bit better, um, and if you can make accounting then part of digital content creation, maybe you're speaking to a whole different segment. But different folks will identify different skill sets that can maximize the operation of the organization. So giving everybody the chance to figure it out, that's not stuff they teach in high school.
Well, I want to keep going back to Purdue Fort Wayne and what Coach Kaufman's doing. The community service piece is something that I've just seen him say. This is not going away. NIL is not going away, and we do not believe in the transactional pay for play. We are going to invest in our community. We're going to invest in our student athletes, and I know from the athletic director to the coaches at the university, they believe in the same mission. And
Mhm.
it's really cool to see a community get behind something that has changed the landscape. The real estate landscape has changed as of this summer on August 17th. And we have to adapt. We have to adapt. And I think we have to be, comfortable with that change. And what I've seen from, the athletic department is they're adapting and they're moving forward and they're having success. And, these kids are, whether they're from Fort Wayne or not, they're investing in this community so that they can be great humans when they leave. And
Well, and the current bandwagon of the Purdue Fort Wayne Mastodons is wide open, right? They're still putting out from a straight athletics performance. The quality of basketball at both the men's program and the women's program is underrated. It's really, really good. And we've been in Fort Wayne. I've been in Fort Wayne for 23, 24 years now. Um, so it's been fun to kind of watch the city evolve and see what it's become. It's still heavily an IU town for basketball. It's still heavily a Notre Dame football town. Purdue is kind of even for both football and basketball, but so we're in that tier. But the accessibility that the Mastodons bring and the opportunity for quality basketball, quality people, and that it's right here. It's one of the underrated assets in the community. And so it does get easy. If you support the city of Fort Wayne for the same reasons, you can easily support the D1 ambassador that is going to every Horizon League conference. And, the folks who call the games get it. They know what kind of assets these basketball programs specifically bring. It's not just basketball. We know there's outstanding golf, the soccer, there's softball, there's baseball. I mean, all of those sports programs are doing really well. And the number of successful launches, the people who have migrated in because they had a good experience in Fort Wayne. I mean, those are your future leaders for the city anyway. That's part of the net migration in. Um, that's part of your workforce. So larger businesses that are looking to relocate, you're going to be looking to PFW graduates as your leaders for your local branches. So it's just the bandwagon's wide open. There's a lot of benefit to affiliation.
Well, and I have an affinity and an affection for the program. I mean, I am who we are describing. I grew up in a different state and relocated here to play basketball, and I made this my home. And now, after 21 years of having a real estate business and helping over 2,000 families move, my impact in this community is something that I understand why. It's because I chose to play basketball here. Did not know what I was getting into at the time, but I am a product of exactly what we're talking about and being able to give back to the community. And I'm happy to do so. And I tell people all the time, I'm not from here, but I'm not leaving.
That's right.
And our family, this is home to us. So as we start to wrap this up a little bit, we talked about some of the ABCs of NIL, a lot of alphabet soup there. We talked about some of the nuances to it and the trajectory of what's happening with social media, and maybe giving some kids some guidance on, you need to build your following, but you have to understand that social media is a dangerous tool. You got to use it the right way. It is still a tool. We talked about, being the best known sometimes beats the best. When it comes to business, are you the business owner out there that you're really trying to be the best, but nobody knows who you are? Nobody knows really who you are. And so, you got to sometimes take a risk and put yourself out there and build quality content. As we wrap up, winning at the game of life. James, you've had a interesting background in litigation, and whether it's insurance or now into NIL as well. What does winning look like for you, for James O'Connor?
Uh, so that, to me, that question gets answered based on, in the game of life, are we looking, is it, family, career, community? For me, it's all of those things. So start with family. We picked Fort Wayne as a place to lay down roots because my wife um, is from Fort Wayne. I'm from New Orleans originally, and she gave me 2 years of good faith effort to say, after those 2 years, I'll live with you anywhere in the country you want to live except New Orleans, because New Orleans is a tough place to be. Now, I'm from there, born and raised, so I know just how hot the water is in that boiling pot. Um, and she did yeoman's effort. She gave me everything, and it was not a fit. And so my thought was, okay, well, um, we want grandparents as an influence on children. Let's give Fort Wayne a shot. She believed in it early. She was an early cheerleader for it. I believed in her and her judgment and discretion, and so we gave it a shot. And it's been probably the deciding factor for where I am today, in a good way. So family, which has allowed me the opportunity then to invest in our three daughters, helping them achieve. And we've got one who's in college, and she's nearing the launch point, full launch point. We've got two high school sophomores, and they're tracking in a very similar way. And we're really excited about what the future holds for them. So for me, we're walking the path that's right for us and what we think winning looks like. From a career perspective, I had some belief in myself that wherever we were, I was going to make that community better just by being willing to participate in nonprofits, being a good ambassador for the law firm I was going to work at. Litigation inherently involves solving other people's problems. And if I was willing to learn the fundamentals of what the practice of law looked like, and steadily stay with it and stay with it and practice, and you fall in love with the practice of law, um, deriving a sense of satisfaction from helping others in a time of crisis. That's cool. All right, so good. Yeah, that helps me feel like I'm checking the box for a career. Um, Community, uh, you know, we live in a great neighborhood. We go to a great church. Um, you know, my job allows me the opportunity to participate in a handful of nonprofit boards. So I get to see the good works that folks banding together for the benefit of Allen County residents are doing. That gives me a sense of satisfaction. It also makes me real tired at the end of the day. So I feel like if I have invested in family, in career, in community, then for the 90 minutes at night where I finally get to just chill, yeah, I've earned it. And then I sleep hard. Um, you string together enough days like that, and it turns into 23 years, and you look back and you go, "Oh, I've met some pretty cool people along the way." So for me, that's kind of what winning looks like: being open to that experience and taking on a new responsibility because NIL and the business of sports interests me. I'm in a position now where I can invest in fun, and it's just a different way to apply the skills I've learned in a way that's fun to me.
That's fantastic. So I heard the answer to winning at the game of life is you are winning. It's not the destination of once I do this, then I'll get there. But you've actually done that. You've modeled it. You're somebody that yeah, I've enjoyed deepening our relationship and our friendship. And when we say relationships win, and we bring people on this podcast, I hope you guys listen to this, enjoy it, share this episode with a friend. James has a lot of good nuggets. If you need legal work, obviously we'll point you towards him. But NIL is fascinating. And I think before we hit record, I told you, I said I had a master's degree in business, but it came from the locker room. And sports has really shaped and molded me to who I am today. Plus, it's just given me the opportunity to have so many great relationships. As we close, the kids say, "Give this man his flowers." Which means his accolades, right? His accolades, appreciation, relationships win. Who is somebody you want to send some virtual flowers to? If you could send some flowers to somebody that really helped you get to where you are today, maybe shaped you, molded you, helped you with your career, maybe it's a personal side of things, but who's somebody you want to send some flowers to?
I don't give enough flowers to my wife, Kim. She tolerates me better than anybody else. She encourages me better than anybody else. So she gets the first nod. In addition to that, whether it's mentoring partners, whether it's friends along the way, people I've been able to help in a little bit, I derive. My cup gets full when I've been able to provide a little bit of help. So when I get those opportunities, even if I'm the one providing the advice, it's because I've had the opportunity that it helps fortify me. So big shout out to Kim, and then anyone who's put their trust in me to help them.
That's fantastic. Uh, we believe relationships win. Part of the responsibility to the listeners of this podcast is if there's a guest that's on that could help you out, that's what we want to do is put you in front of people. So how can the listeners help James win? How can we follow you? Who are you looking to meet? Who do you want to be introduced to? How can we help James win?
So thank you. That's cool. Fort Wayne is a 2 degrees of separation kind of place. There's a tremendous amount of high level talent, sports wise, in the city of Fort Wayne. Um, I know this goes everywhere, so it's not limited to that. So if whether you're in Fort Wayne or outside Fort Wayne, and you've got that person who you think is elite, you've got that person who probably could benefit from adding some legal direction to their board of directors, that's somebody I want to know. Please feel free to put my email in the show notes. I'll leave it to you to get me some links. But yeah, those are fun conversations, and that's how you can help.
That's fantastic. Thank you for being on here. Again, relationships win. James, I appreciate you, my man.
Appreciate it, Brad. Always a pleasure.
All right. That's a wrap. Go ahead and subscribe, send this episode to a friend, leave a review, but just remember, relationships win.